One thing that may be clear from the review videos on this channel and the travel videos and almost everything else that we do is that Raymond and I have a time-lapse addiction. I'm not sure if it started with astrophotography or if landscape photography fed the astro time-lapse addiction. Either way, it's something that we do now almost everywhere we go. We time-lapse. I have shared videos about time lapses in the past, but today's video is the first in a three-part series where we show you exactly how we edit time lapses using 3 popular photo editing tools. We do all of our time lapses as a long series of raw images. This gives us the most flexibility, while often also consuming a ridiculous amount of storage space. However, when it all clicks together, you've let the camera do its thing and you come back and you work with those files. Sometimes there are thousands of them. And what we are going to do today is show you how we go from those raw images to a smooth, cohesive time lapse that literally changes time, showing you not only how something looked when we were present, but bending time so that you can see how it changed. Sometimes showing you hours of shots in just a few seconds. Raymond has taken the helm of editing many of our time lapses, from sky and astrophotography to various landscape time lapses as we've tested lenses and camera bodies. The location and circumstances of each time lapse are always different, and editing software is really your chance to turn that time lapse into your own work of art. Today, Raymond is going to edit one of our recent time lapses in Lightroom, and then he will show you 2 methods for converting that time lapse into a video. First, in Adobe Photoshop, which can actually create video files if you follow the right steps. And also, more recently, we've been using Final Cut Pro 10 to go from those images edited in Lightroom to video. So, he will show you that as well. We'll switch over to Raymond now, and then I will be back at the end to wrap it all up and tell you what's coming next in this series.
Thanks, Leigh. Here in Lightroom today, that's where I'm going to be doing the edits. And I'm going to take those edits and export them and then bring them into Final Cut Pro for one sequencing method to make a movie out of all the edits. And then I'm also going to do it in Photoshop as well, which would be a complete Adobe solution. But for both of those outcomes today, I'm going to start in Lightroom. So let's go to File, Import. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the considerations along the way. You don't have to do it the same way that I do. I'm just showing you one way of doing this. I'm importing about 877 images taken with the Sony a7R IV from a sunrise. In fact, I'm going to pick a certain image because it's a sunrise. I don't want to edit the beginning. I'm actually going to edit an image towards the end, and I'm going to apply those edits across the board. Now, there's other ways to do that. There's software and tools that help you do keyframes, so you're editing multiple images and the time lapse will evolve from one edit to the other. In this case, I'm keeping it super simple today, and this is what we do for most of our time lapses most of the time, is we pick one target image, we make it wonderful, and then we have that be what the time lapse is either working towards or working from. Because this is more of a sunrise type situation, I'm going to pick an image towards the end of the time lapse and have the time lapse work towards that target image. But I've previewed this time lapse and it does some beautiful things along the way. It's a wonderful sequence of images here. I don't think we use this in any videos. One quirk in this time lapse, and we run into this in Arizona sometimes, is it appears as though, and we'll see this much later on, it appears as though at some point during the time lapse early on, the tripod might have sunk into the dirt a little bit, and that happens in the desert. You think your tripod's good. A little bit of wind blows and the soil changes, so depending on what tripod you have and what circumstances you're in, you may encounter that. And there's things that you can do about that as well, either on the front end here in Lightroom or in an editing tool like Final Cut Pro. So let's pick a target image. I'm going to pick one towards the end, but not the last image. And that's going to help me highlight something in just a few minutes. I'm going to go to Develop here. And From the thumbnails, the image looked a little bit crooked. If I wanted to, I could change the angle a little bit here. But to be honest, with that tree line there, it's really hard to tell, to make a judgment for sure. I'm sure Leigh leveled it really well out in the field. I don't think I was with her for this one, but it looks really good. And I think I was just fooled down in the thumbnails by the tree line. Here, we run into that in some other areas of the desert. We run into that at the Grand Canyon because the rim of the Grand Canyon that you're facing is not completely level. So you get to make an artistic decision whether to level the camera to the earth or level the camera to the visible horizon, and those two might differ. So I'm going to leave the angle alone. I'm going to go down here. I'm not going to do much within this image. And one thing that I've learned about time lapses, I'll just kind of edit as I talk here. One thing I've learned about time lapses is I have started editing them differently than I might edit a single image. And the reason for that is with a time lapse, you're introducing the element of time. And I've been known to make some big puffy edits on individual still images. I don't think, from my personal opinion with a time lapse, is you don't need to go quite as far as you might with an individual image, because you get to see the evolution of the frame. And I don't necessarily want to overwhelm the viewer. I don't want to make it necessarily too much of a feast for the eyes, because you've got motion, and I don't want to oversaturate everything. In fact, if you go too far, especially in pushing shadows where there might be some noise, so you might use some noise reduction, some of those more advanced or more intense features can render differently from frame to frame. So the further you go, I don't think it would be an issue necessarily in this image one way or the other, but the further you go, even with the dehaze, we've run into this in astrophotography where there can be a lot of noise and you might be working at a higher ISO. The further you go, the more you can run into those artifacts, which won't show themselves on an individual image. It will look fine, but when you run the sequence of images, you can see some undesirable effects. You'll know them when you see them. For us, especially with astro, it can be flickering or different rendering of noise reduction, things like that from frame to frame. So I tend to go lighter on time lapses and let the beauty of changing time in nature take care of itself, instead of me trying to puff and pop out an individual image, like frankly I might do sometimes if I'm just working on a single image instead of 877. So I made some edits to sort of add a little bit of pop to this image. I don't know, it looks pretty good. I might just brighten it up just a little bit here, somewhere around there. Yeah, let's go with that. I'm working towards this. This is when the sun is up. Now the real key now is to get these same edits applied across the board. I'm going to make sure, of course, that I'm selected on the image that I just edited, and I am. And I'm going to press Control A, or in this case on a Mac, Command A. And that's the Select All shortcut. I'm sure I could do that up on the menu, but I'm just used to doing it down here. Now, okay, we've selected all the images. How are we going to synchronize these edits across the images? They're all selected, but if you look really close, number 873 here is selected just a little bit more. It's a little bit brighter. That's going to be the reference image for when we go to Settings, Sync Settings. If you cropped, make sure, or straightened, make sure that that's selected. Most of these others will select by default. I didn't do any local adjustments or any of these transformations. Everything else is checked, even some of the things I didn't touch. Let's click Synchronize. And in the upper left-hand corner, it says Pasting Settings. Depending on the settings that you changed and the size of your images and all kinds of different factors, this might take a while. Mine's actually moving fairly quickly, maybe even a little bit more quickly than I expected. But what we should end up with when this is done, you can click here to get status, and it's blazing through these images. What we'll be able to do once it's fully synchronized them is go to any image and just do some spot checking to make sure that the edits on this image did not produce anything undesirable on other images. We can always edit another image, hit the Command A, and then sync those settings across the images and do it again. Let's see if we get it on the first try here. So let's go to the middle. Looks good to me. That looks great to me. We also like to shoot our time lapses in a way, even if it's an astrophotography time lapse, in a way that any still image could be used as an image. And that means, you know, choosing the aperture that we'd want, choosing a shutter speed that wouldn't introduce blur if there was wind in the tree, and might drive our ISO higher to make sure that we're actually freezing the frame for a windy situation or a nighttime astro situation where the Earth is rotating. But we tend to shoot shutter speeds where the stars would still be distinct points rather than trails in the sky. This is all looking very good. It's going to start here, and it's going to end here, and those clouds are going to move along the way. So now we've got to talk about the export. We're still selected on all of them. We can always hit Command A if we're not sure. And we'll go to File, Export. You're going to choose a path. You can really, if you want to, get into these naming conventions. And if you look here, I have the image number, but then I also have the settings. And if you notice, what we do sometimes, actually quite often in videos, is put the settings in the video at the bottom of the image. By using this option, plus info, this gets this information in the file name and just gives us one more reference point in Final Cut Pro as to what the shooting data is, because in Final Cut Pro, when you click on the image that you're using, it'll show you the file name. So just a little tip right there. If you don't like long file names, you don't need to do that. You will see that my file names are going to be fairly long. That's okay. Computers can handle that now. Another consideration that you want to make, and this could come into play in your editing software. I don't have a resize going here. These are going to be huge. What's the A7R4? Like 67 megapixels, somewhere over 60 megapixels. I could resize these here right now for 4K or for 1080p if that's the only resolution I was going to publish the final time lapse in. In fact, I'm not sure that Photoshop's tool for making videos in time lapses even allows you to do greater than 4K. So you might choose to resize here. Here's a reason why you might not want to if you're using video editing software like I will first in Final Cut Pro. If I'm mastering the images, the edited images, all 877 of them, in the full resolution, I have more flexibility when editing the time lapse in Final Cut Pro. I could do a pan, I could do a Ken Burns zoom, and I'm not diminishing my resolution now. I'm keeping the full resolution intact on the source images with these edits that I'm going to apply to them. So we're making JPEGs here, but we're leaving them at full resolution in case we wanted to take on more flexibility, like pans and zooms and things in the video editing software. Use your discretion. If you're going to run it as a static time lapse, which is what we do most of the time, you could do a 4K conversion right here and be working with smaller files in your output folder. So I'm going to go ahead and export these, and then I'll see you on the other side in Final Cut Pro, where we pull them in and we put this time lapse together as a video file. Then we'll do it another time in Photoshop in this video today. Here we are in Final Cut Pro, and I've set up a library and a project. So we're going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to point to the folder where we have created those images. I like sorting them by file name. Select all of them, import. Now, the goal here is to get them into a single event, and so that they flow for as long as we want to. They're going to actually come in as like 10-second video clips, but we're going to consolidate them and change that timing very quickly. I'm going to pick 10 seconds. I like previewing time lapses at 10 seconds and then run it longer or shorter. We've got 877 images, so a little math here. 877 divided by 30. That would be a 29.23 second time lapse if we were to use every single image and have each image show as an individual frame. You can certainly run it that long. I like starting at 10 seconds just to get the flow and then adjusting from there. I may or may not be using every frame as a result, and it usually comes out really smooth regardless. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to Command A, and then I'm going to drag all of those into the timeline. Now this might take a moment depending on your computer, how many images and how big the images are. But when we drag them into the timeline, and they will get there, they will all be selected, and keep them all selected. It is going to ask us about our video. We're doing 4K 30 these days, so that's what I'll do. So they're all selected down to the bottom. Leave it that way. Right click, new compound clip. And then you don't see any breaks between them. Now you can retime it, but I've noticed something lately in Final Cut Pro. If it's still doing the background tasks up here, it actually won't let me retime this clip down to 10 seconds. So you can either wait it out, or I actually go down here and I kill these background tasks. This is not the most elegant thing in the world to do, but what I've found is when I go to the next step, the retime, if it's running the background processes, as I'm retiming it to 10 seconds, it puts the original time frame of the video back, which is a tremendous amount of time, 10 seconds for each clip by default. So I stop those, and then when I go to custom down here, and I change the duration to 10 seconds, oh, not there. 0, 0, 0, 0, there. This will make it 10 seconds. If I don't kill those background tasks first, it literally just puts the numbers back as I'm trying to type new ones in there. So now you can see we're down to 10 seconds. Now, because we killed the background tasks, it's going to have to start them over again. So if I come over here and I hit the space bar, I'm not yet going to be looking at a smooth flowing version of the time lapse. This is not what the final product is going to look like. And then this is also the time to start thinking about anything that you might want to do here in Final Cut Pro. You can see one thing right away. I've got black bars on the sides because the camera's not inherently 16:9 like the video format is. So you're either going to pull into the image or you're going to leave the black bars on the sides. I'm going to leave the bars on the sides right now. This is also where, since we kept the full resolution images, this is also where you might want to think about any other cropping or transitions or Ken Burns effects to pull the viewer into the image. I'm keeping it super simple today. We did the edits in Lightroom. We're sequencing them in Final Cut Pro, and it looks like it started over up here. I'm going to go ahead and master the time lapse, and we'll take a look at it in just a moment. Looks great. Those clouds are moving across the sky. The colors are changing. You could maybe see that little hitch in there where the tripod probably shifted a little bit. I could go to that frame in Final Cut Pro. I could shift it down to compensate for that. Probably make it look pretty smooth across the board. Not going to worry about that today. I'm showing you the process. Sometimes things come out a little bit different than other times, and this was one of those occasions. All right, I've got Photoshop open, but I also made a copy of my folder here. Photoshop is very picky about file names. It wants them in sequence, and it doesn't want a lot else in the file names. So I went to those previous files. I made a copy of the folder first. But what I did here on the Mac is I selected them all. I went to Action. I went to Rename. And I just used name and counter. I put a D underscore, I don't know why. So there are D underscore and then just a sequence number. That way, when we go to Photoshop, click open, go to that new folder, click on the very first image, number 1, click image sequence. It's going to ask you a frame rate. That's just for previewing. That's not for rendering the final video. Click OK, put in 30, whatever you'd like there. Now it's going to pull in that first image and then every other image that it finds, as long as the file names are incrementing 1 digit at a time. I can't emphasize that enough. It's picky as anything, and you can end up with half a time lapse if you're not careful with your file sequences. If you used a camera that might have dropped an image or two because you were running a little too hot on your interval timer, you might have to go down and do a rename to get them all flowing 1 digit increment at a time. Now the rest of this is really quick. What we're going to do is go to File, Export, Render Video. This is where you're going to pick your resolution, your frame rate, your file name, all that good stuff. Click render, and it's going to make you an MP4 file per the specifications that you had up on the screen. I left mine, I don't know if those are the defaults or just the ones that I used last time. I left mine at 3840 by 2160, 30 frames per second. If you're authoring for 1080p or something else, go for it. I don't think it'll let you go higher than 4K. If you have ambitions for beautiful 8K time lapses or more from your camera time lapses, from your huge camera images, you can give it a shot, but I'm not sure that it's going to work unless something's changed in the most recent version here.
Thank you, Raymond. Like I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing our process with other editing software in future videos. Specifically, we will be using Capture One and DxO Photo Lab. But in the meantime, let's chat. What do you use for time lapses? Do you use some other software, or do you have some special sauce that makes your process unique? Let us know in the comments. Make sure that you like this video and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more from us. If you hit the bell, you will even be notified when we share new videos. And thank you for watching.